Our next speaker, Ola Sendecka, is a community activist. She's the co-founder of Django Girls, also a Django Core developer and Django Software Foundation member. Ola will discuss how we can realize that our development process is going in a wrong direction. Into the rabbit hole, Ola Sendecka.
So, hello everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I just moved to London like 2 months ago, and I'm really glad to be back in Poland and speak to this awesome audience. So my talk is kind of weird because I will start with telling you a story. And the story will be about Alice. Alice in Django land, obviously. If you don't follow all the code examples, you shouldn't worry, because it's not the point of the talk. So don't be intimidated by the code here, if you even can see that. I'm not sure if it will be visible. So Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on a bank and having nothing to do. I'm bored, she mumbled to herself. I want to do something exciting. Her sister was doing something. She had like half an hour. So she decided that she will just go back to her project and code a little bit. She felt a little bit guilty because she was visiting her family not very often, and she was not supposed to do that. But she really wanted to fix some small thing in her project. Her project was quite big. A lot of legacy code was there. A lot of things were very tightly coupled. But she knew the code, so she felt very confident that she can do everything very quick. So one of the part of the project was tracking time. So she basically had some project there, and she could just write down how much time she spent on one project. But the project, and also many other models in this application of Alice, was special because you could archive models, and they were still there in the database, but they did not clutter, and you had the forms only with active projects or other models. She had it done like this. She had the parent class archivable should just have like is active field, and then she just basically inherited from that and override objects manager with active manager that was filtering out everything that is archived. So then she could basically had many projects, write time to that, and after finishing the project, she could archive it. But still, she could access the time she had logged in, and she had this big view, so she could look what she was doing the last month. And she noticed that something is wrong. So basically, she looked at the view with all the months stuff, what she did, and she saw this. And maybe you don't notice what's wrong with that, but Alice looked at that and she was like, I hate typos, and it's like improving performance without O. So she immediately clicked the edit button, and she saw this. That was wrong. Where is my project? Alice asked herself. What's wrong? She thought a little bit, and she realized what's the problem. She basically used the object manager that was only having active instances, and because she archived the project here, she couldn't access that, obviously. So even though in the normal scenario, normal workflow, what she really wanted was to have only active instances, in this very scenario, so when she wanted to edit all the other stats like minutes, description, and different things, she wanted to access also the current value. Yeah, so Alice think a little bit how to solve it, and she was very sure she can do that very easily, because so far, everything in Django is super easy. And it was like all the batteries, and she just used something and it just worked. So what she wanted, because she had like loads of forms already, she just wanted to have probably some kind of function, like preserve existing choices that took the form and just iterate over all the fields, check if it's archivable, and then do stuff for it. She immediately thought about query sets, because she defined the problem that what she wants in her model forms is having query set with active instances and the current one. So yeah, she started coding. So she wanted to have in this function, she wanted to have this field that had different query set that was kind of extended query set that just had the old one, so old query set plus the current value. She started coding, hoping that she will be done very, very quickly. Soon, she had her first sketch ready. It looks something like that. So in init, she just had the current value, she saved that, and then in iterator, after everything was done, she basically returned it. Voila, she's done. She happily opened the browser, hit enter, and refresh page, and this is what she saw. That was not good. She started debugging. She knew that she had not much time. She wanted to go back to her sister and speak with her, but she didn't know where exactly the problem is. She dived into Django, debugged it a little bit. She tried to override different parts of query set, but she failed, and she decided it's not the way to go. So during her trials, this is a very polished slide. So during her trials, she realized that the error happened somewhere in the model choice iterator. So yeah, why not to override model choice iterator, she thought. She deleted extended query set and started coding. After some time, she had this. It looked pretty similar. In init, she just passed the value, and then in iter, she was once again returning the value she wanted to have. And then in the function she was calling, so in preserve existing choices, she was just doing something like that. So just changing the choices on the field with her extended model choices iterator. She refreshed the page and yeah, victory, I did it. It's there. She corrected the typo, saved, and this is what she saw. What's wrong? Why? It should work. At this moment, her sister came. Alice, do you want to have a tea? I just need to fix this problem. I will be done in 5 minutes. So she started to look into code, put like doing PDB and going step by step. She dived into Django, try to like print stuff, try to wrap her head around the code. But it's very hard for her to like she was not understanding the problem properly, but she just wanted to get rid of the problem as soon as possible. She realized that something was wrong in model choice field in toPython method, and immediately, without even thinking what she was doing, she decided, okay, I will override it too. So she did. And it looked like this. So in toPython, she didn't even bother to like reuse something that was in Django. She just like copy-pasted toPython method as it is and just added some, returning her value somewhere in the middle. And in preserve existing choices, she was creating the extended model choice field and changing form fields with that. Now, Alice said, it must work. I will just go and my sister won't be angry, even though a couple of hours already passed. She refreshed the page with the form and saved it. It worked. So she felt that it's over and she started to feel relaxed. She overridden like model choice iterator and model choice field already, But yeah, it's kind of ugly, but it works. She convinced herself. But it was not over. It was still wrong. And she noticed that when she tried to change widget of the model form, and instead of this, she had this still. And immediately she realized what's the problem. Because she was just creating field from outside, putting them into the form. And she had no idea what was the widget or any other things in the form. So how it was initialized. So she looked into Django code and see how model choice field was initialized. And it looks like this. Loads of stuff. No, I don't want to do that, Alice said, but there must be a way. I just spent so much time. I need to do that. And her sister came again. Alice, the tea is cold already. Just go away. I just need to fix it. Alice said. She was very irritated. And okay, so if she didn't want to overwrite model choice field, but she just wanted to change the Python method. So she was starting to think about it, and then after a while, if I inject this to Python method somehow to existing field, maybe I can do that. So this is what she did. She created a function that was doing exactly the same as the toPython method she had in extended model choice field. And then in preserve existing choices, she basically injected that into the field that was existing. At this stage, it finally worked. And Alice decided that she will leave it as it is. The code was ugly, weird, confusing, and barely working. It was like a house of cards, very fragile and really like ready to collapse anytime. She was, after a while, like she knew that like all her family is angry on her. She was angry that she ended up with the code, weird code, and like everyone felt very bad about it. And she spent hours doing something that she thought it will be like half an hour. After a while, she looked into repository at the code, and she had no idea how she ended up with this weird code. She was super ashamed of that. She spent hours on making something that seemed easy at the beginning, and in the end, she was super ashamed of it. What happened? Asked Alice. How I end up doing all of this? Exactly. This is a good question. What happened? Alice, obviously, was in a rabbit hole. So I'm sure that all of you has intuition what rabbit hole is, but I want to redefine it for you. So I define rabbit hole as the act of getting so caught up with what you are doing that you lose track of time, wasting precious minutes, hours, or even days, and it negatively impacts your overall productivity. You cannot give up, you just want to fix it, and you don't see what's going on really. You just want to get rid of this error you have. This happens to me from time to time, and every time it happens, I end up feeling frustrated, angry, helpless, and stupid. Next time I look into the code, I have no idea how I came up with this code, and I know I would do that totally differently, and I would not go the path I took. And I wonder how I end up just spending hours and probably convincing others that this path is okay. When I was preparing this talk, it was like very frustrating to put all the code here because it was horrendous. So let's talk a little bit how Alice ended up in the rabbit hole. First of all, she assumed that the problem she's solving is easy. She expected easy solution, and therefore she did not thought all the implication of what she was doing. She was like, yeah, I just want this thing be displayed here. Next thing is that Alice was only fixing one symptom at a time. She was not looking at the bigger picture, and she just like had an expected error, and she just tried to get rid of that. She also continues even after the number of failures. She overridden query set and failed. She overridden model choice iterator and failed. She then overridden model choice field and failed. There is like so many things going wrong. It's like you should have like the yellow card, or like something is wrong here and you should stop, but she didn't. And yeah, so she also was super sure she will be done in like 5-10 minutes. She was saying to her, "Be done quick. I'll just have the tea with you like in 10 minutes." And the solution is like just one step away. Finally, she couldn't give up. Maybe she was too ashamed to admit that she cannot solve something on her own. Or maybe she wanted to prove to herself that this easy problem, it must be easy, and she need to do that on her own. But yeah, rabbit hole is potentially very dangerous. It sabotage not only at productivity of the developer, but also her confidence. So, how can one fight the rabbit holes? First of all, is to realize that you are in one. I had so many times that like I was so convinced I am on good track, but I wasn't. It is not easy. But once we manage to identify the moments that we are stuck, then we can ask for help much quicker. And instead of spending hours and hours doing horrible code and then be ashamed for like the rest of your life because somewhere in the repository is when you do blame, you see this code. So I wrote down some symptoms I have, and this is not an extensive list. First one is that you don't know where the time flies. 2 or 3 hours feels like 5 minutes. You are always almost done. Yes, you are hungry and thirsty because you forget to eat anything. For me, I so many times I end up like at the end of the day, I was so hungry, I couldn't move. It was like somebody served me. So you are fixed on solving the problem. You ignore everything around, including your body and its needs. You also can't think about anything else. You just go to have a coffee, and near the coffee machine you have debugging session in your head, like, what if I check this value there, and maybe this is somewhere in the model choice iterator in something, and then you just immediately go back to your laptop without the coffee, and you try that. Yeah, you haven't spoken with anyone for hours. It's tricky when you are a remote worker, because you will not notice that. I was working for 3 years as remote, so it was tricky. But I also like stopped chatting, looking at anything. I just did not react on that. And finally, feeling extremely unhappy when anyone dared to interrupt you. It doesn't matter if it's a colleague, a boss, a neighbor, or even a food delivery. You just feel cranky, irritated, you want to kill them. Yeah, so how to get out of the rabbit hole? So what could you do? And I have just number of tips, but I still sometimes struggle to do that, mostly because even if like my boss asks me, "Ola, are you stuck? Are you in the rabbit hole?" I was, no, I'm not. But if you really believe that you are in one, this is some things you could do. When you suspect that you are in a rabbit hole, you look at the next task, next error you're dealing with, and you estimate the time you plan to spend on that, and set a timer. It's really important to have the real timer, either in your computer or I know, it could be even manual one. And then after the time passes, just make a break. Making a to-do list also helps, because it forces you to think about what you want to achieve. It's not like, I want to fix this problem. I just don't want to see this attribute error or whatever I'm receiving now. And of course, it's connected. Rubber duck also is a good idea if you try to express aloud what you try to achieve, so you have bigger picture of what you're doing. In case of Alice, she would just realize that she's doing weird stuff, trying to fix some stuff in the form, or just choices, but there is like whole model form, whole model underneath. So this one is really, really good. So if you take a longer break, and it's very important to stop thinking about it. So if you do debugging session in your head, it's not a break. You should go, I don't know, swimming, or watch a movie, or speak with somebody else about something totally different. So making a break helps a lot, especially if it's longer, like an hour or a day. And finally, and I think this one is the best, at least in my case, is asking for help. And yeah, you might be too proud to ask for help, and don't want to show that you can solve the problem alone. But honestly, it is so much better to ask for help earlier than have this horrible code in the repository and be ashamed all, like, I know, to the end of the time. However, make sure that the person you ask for help really wants to help you. I mean, they are focused on what you're doing and not doing their own debugging sessions, because sometimes I end up convincing others that I'm doing something useful, but I was not doing that. So make sure that the person wants to help you and is focused on you. So if you are in a rabbit hole, there's so many bad stuff going on, but at least there is one thing that is positive. That means that you are probably curious and you cannot give up, and you're not afraid of like diving inside like the library or Django or whatever. Just like you cannot give up. You just want to fix that, and it's good for your side projects. But if you start to waste your client's money, because the task was estimated for 30 minutes, so they decided to do that. But if they knew it's like one day, they won't do that because it's not so important. So, yeah, so rabbit holes are potentially very dangerous. They can make a lot of damage to you because they, as I said before, they will make you feel ashamed of your code. It's less likely that you will, I don't know, write code in open source, because if you are in rabbit hole and you do that alone and just push that there, and people will start to comment and you realize that you did something weird, it's not very cool. And you start to feel that you're not good enough, that you're dumb, but you're not. You're just in a rabbit hole. So yeah, I'm Ola Sendecka. I'm Django Girls co-founder, Django Core team member. I'm working for Potato. I'm not actually the potato. I'm a developer with many years of experience. Yet, I find myself from time to time in rabbit holes. They make me feel bad about my skills and undermine my self-confidence. That is why I'm super happy to hear your tips and tricks, how to become unstuck when you are in this horrible funnel with potentially only one way out through the rabbit hole. So I would be glad to hear from you about your stories, the ways of avoiding, noticing, and getting out of the rabbit holes. Thank you. I also procrastinated when I wrote this talk because I was drawing my slide. So I was working on this, on my talk, but I was drawing. So yeah.
Thank you for the talk very much, Ola. Is there anything you would like to ask? Come on, children, don't be shy.
I won't kill anyone today.
Yeah, I have a question right here. So actually, most of the ways to realize I'm in a rabbit hole you mentioned seems exactly like being in a flow when you're on to something great, actually, right? So
Yes, that's true.
how can you really tell it just you're not in the perfect way to do something great?
Yeah, so I don't really believe in flow because I think it's too close to the rabbit hole, and you are in a flow, it's hard to notice the bigger picture, and in the end you can be like the flow will be in reality rabbit hole. And I think that teamwork and like doing stuff with other people will benefit from your code. So like the flow is not like my favorite way of working at all, because I will produce the code that only I understand or is weird. So yeah, I'm not a fan of flow.
I believe that the key thing is to avoid such situations is to if something goes wrong, you first should learn well what is the culprit, to understand the problem, because if you try to fix some superficially if you try to fix it only on the surface, and you don't understand what is really going on, it is the best recipe to go into the rabbit hole, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's the best way to just avoid it. But I mean, yeah, that was just an example. And I believe that every person has their own rabbit holes. It just different moments of time, different code parts. And yeah, if Alice thought long enough before she was doing, and she was not convinced that she's doing something easy, then she might just avoid all of that. And she will realize that afterwards. But if you are in a rabbit hole, it's very hard to get out of that, because you're just have this like in your mind that you will be done and you are doing something good, but you're not. So like if you can avoid it, it's perfect. But once you are in one and it's a bad moment of time and bad project, it can be very, very dangerous for you.
One way for recognizing I'm in the rabbit hole. Question you had, because I also noticed every single point that you said was flow state, and for me that's a positive thing, but I understand that for everyone. Frustration. I mean, if you're doing all those things and you're frustrated, you're not doing something right. If you're doing all those things and you're feeling very well satisfied and feel like you're just going 100 miles an hour, it's fantastic. It's great. You're in a flow. And to get out, great tips, fantastic thing. Just step away, think about it. And a lot of times the problem is at the very beginning. Like you didn't even notice you were taking this first step into the rabbit hole. And the only way to avoid that is to get into a lot of rabbit holes early on so that you can spot them in the future.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, frustration, one of the symptoms.
I have a question. Do you have some advice maybe for a GitHub workflow where you have a private repository and you share the code with a friend and work on it, have a code review, and then you are open sourcing the code, so you don't have the problem of being ashamed and not wanting to even commit this?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, asking for help somebody else it's totally the greatest way to do things. So people will help you with noticing that you're doing something totally wrong. But sometimes, especially when you start, you not actually feel confident enough. And I know I had to prove myself so many times, and now I'm super confident about my skills. But I don't always am, and not always you have somebody to ask in your office, for example. But yeah, it's sometimes good to ask for help in the internet, or just even to talk to the friend who is not programmer or it's not technical. If you try to like express stuff you want to do in non-technical way, it also helps. So yeah, I think that it takes a lot of practice to get out, and collaborations, I think they're like my favorite way to get out of that.
Hello. I don't know about you guys. I probably get stuck every day or every second day. Not in a bad way, because I found a way to get stuck really fast and not for long. Basically, besides getting stuck every day, I also have like 50 tasks to do a day. So my solution is create 50 branches to work on the 50 tasks and just keep switching between them. Well, not really. But as soon as you get stuck, you either get up, get a coffee, talk to a friend, stretch your legs, or switch to another branch and start working on it. Eventually, we'll probably find a solution in your subconscious. So you are really not stuck all the time. That's my suggestion, because you asked for it.
Yeah.
Also, I find that sex helps.
So I can confirm that, not about sex, but about the constant, constant interruption. So not to get into the rabbit hole, neither to the flow, just get constantly interrupted. And the pair programming helps a lot to get constantly interrupted. And as everyone knows, 1 + 1 gives more than 2 because of synergy. So not only you will get constantly interrupted, you will learn from each other, and you will avoid rabbit holes.
Yeah.
That's my recipe.
But sometimes it's, yeah, so the story is that some part of this code that is horrible here was written during the pair programming session. So it does not always work like this. But yeah, it's sometimes it's fine to ask somebody who's not into the thing from the very beginning. And yeah, it's like likelihood of having that in a pair programming session is not very high. But it happens.
So the practice in salsa training is that you change partners every 5 minutes. Maybe that would help.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree. Now I work for a bigger company, so it's possible. But if you are, for example, a remote worker and you have no person to ask for help, it's really tricky. So yeah, it's hard in many levels, but yeah, totally, I agree. It's very good tip.
Okay, time for the last question.
So actually, yeah. So like for me, I found myself that a good way to prevent the rabbit hole is to read and learn more. So this is like, yeah, it helps a lot, because like the bad thing is if you like write a lot of code but not read much. So it is like, I mean, like it's a bad thing if if such a thing happens. So
yeah, for sure. More knowledge, more experience helps, and yeah, and also reading what's going on in, like, if you dive into, for example, Django to know what really query set do, or model choice field. It's not like, oh, this is this iter, I just add this here and it will appear. No, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, now is the last one.
Okay, so I rather agree with my colleagues who thinks that that the flow and high concentration is a good thing, and makes you toward good things, and it's very useful. And you do not always have an opportunity to pair programming and so on. So when do you know when is the border between a flow which is useful and the rabbit hole? When do you can say that it's enough? I spent too much time for that problem.
Yeah, so it's very hard for me still to judge it, and since I was in the rabbit hole many times, I am better with realizing that I am in one. And mostly it's like this irritation, frustration that I don't speak with anyone. Like all the symptoms, I list that. They are from my own experience. But still, there are moments that I don't realize that, and I realize that afterwards. So yeah, that's why I'm giving the talk. So I hope that you will tell me how it should be done better. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.